Fall camp is just days away. What's the biggest question facing Nebraska heading into fall camp? We discuss it next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down and football winds back up. Sports are going to come back. So guess what? FanDuel is still hooking you up every day this summer. All customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head to FanDuel.com and get started.
All right, welcome in. It is Monday. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, joined as always by Connor Happer from Omaha's 1620 The Zone. Wow, do we have a big week on tap for you? I hesitate to say, I think I'm excited to say the biggest week in the history of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Connor, is that possible from both a personal and professional standpoint?
It just might be. We first of all, let's start professionally, because I'm ready to do this podcast while there's stuff to talk about. I'm ready to do this podcast while there's football. So we'll get into a variety of those questions this week and get ready to roll. Personally, yes, I am very happy to become a father for the first time this week, and so we'll have that too. So like I said on Friday, if I'm gone like invariably whatever over the next couple of weeks, then please forgive me. But I'm ready to do this thing. We're ready to ramp up. We're back on the 5-day schedule, and we got big picture stuff to get to today and beyond.
Yes. So if Connor is looking a little sleepy in the morning, or he's just not there altogether, you'll know what's going on. So big week for sure for Connor and his family. In football, we have major recruiting developments that we're going to get to in this episode. There was big stuff that happened on Friday with the settlement related to the NCAA antitrust case that directly impacts Nebraska. We've got number 2 in our countdown of most important Huskers ahead of preseason camp. That will be over. That countdown will get to number 1 on Tuesday, so tune in. All of it packed in, but let's start with what is going on in Lincoln this weekend. Preseason camp is starting on Wednesday. Tuesday is the report date for players. Practice number 1 on the grass Wednesday morning. On Tuesday, Nebraska will send Coach Matt Rhule, coordinators Tony White, Marcus Satterfield, and Ed Foley, plus several players out in front of the media. We will be drinking from the fire hose at the Hawks Championship Center for sure, with all kinds of sound and video. Before we get too far into this week and you're just filled up with all kinds of new content related to Nebraska and preseason camp, let's look at one thing from the beginning with some clear eyes. And I want to ask you, Connor, what you believe the number 1 question is heading into preseason camp. I've got my answer, but what's yours?
Well, I agree with you. I know what yours is, and I agree with you. And it's something that we can't answer, and we won't know, until the season really goes, and you just like, you can't answer it because it's something that doesn't really that doesn't, you don't see it until the football games start happening, or maybe even beyond that. And I wonder about this program mentally, and I think that's still kind of where you're at from last year. I think they've done a lot of things to put themselves in good position, from a football standpoint. Like, they've improved the talent on the roster. Obviously, they've got the 5-star quarterback. Like, they've done all these things right. They've recruited well, right? But you're still going to be in close games. It's still going to be 17-17 with 3 minutes left, and until further notice, Nebraska is expected to not make those plays and win those games, because that's what they've done pretty much nonstop, over the last decade, or a half a decade at least. And so until you do it, you haven't done it yet. And I think Matt Rhule is hoping that the work that they've done gives them the confidence to be able to make those plays in those moments. But you don't know until you know. And I absolutely think that's the biggest thing, because they can feel as good as they want, but Matt Rhule knows it because he's designed the team this way. They're gonna play in close games, and they're gonna have to make plays instead of not make plays. And they've fallen flat on their face a lot. And that includes last year when Matt Rhule was the coach. So you just don't know about that yet. It's a huge question.
That's it for me. It's big picture. And I know we're going to talk about a lot of stuff that's not big picture when Tuesday rolls around and the players are answering questions. And look, we want to hear the details too. We want to hear about the running back race. We want to hear about the quarterback picture. We want to hear about the development of the offensive line. We want to hear about the freshmen and how the secondary coach is going to transition to a new job that he's been in for less than a month. We want to hear about how the linebackers are going to replace their two big dogs from the past couple of years. But I think all of that pales in comparison to asking or answering whether Nebraska has turned a corner as a program. The last time we saw this team, it was dejected after losing to Iowa on Black Friday in heartbreaking fashion that was all too familiar. It was Nebraska in position to win with the ball in the final minutes around midfield. At worst, this game is going to overtime.
Yep.
And there you go. Interception, field goal, crawling over the crossbar, unheralded kicker. Iowa's celebrating on Nebraska's field. What a ridiculously terrible gut punch that was. I heard something interesting at Big Ten Media Days. Iowa did play 2 games after that. Those were the last points that Iowa has scored. Those were the most recent points that Iowa has scored. So just like another little reason to feel good or bad is what I really mean about the way that Nebraska performed the last time we saw these Huskers on a football field. So all of the hype, all of the talk, all of the tweets and recruiting visits and whatever it is that we've seen through a long off season, that's all great, but it comes down to what you do on the field. And that question still lingers out there for Nebraska. Is it a different program today than what we saw at the end of November, really all through November?
Mitch, I always say this, like you only, unfortunately, you could do so many things right. And obviously the things that you do right during the off season or in between tests are going to help you do better on the tests, but you only get 12 tests. That's it. That's what this class is graded on. There's no quizzes. There's no homework. There's no anything. Like, you get the 12 tests, and whatever you are in the 12 tests is what you are. And so obviously the things that you do outside of them will help you be better during it. But that's where Nebraska has fallen short. I think they felt like they've done a lot of things really well. And to a certain extent, I think you could look at last year and say, all right, let's brush that off the shoulder. It's year 1 under Matt Rhule. This is always how it's gone, and we're expecting it to follow the same path. And they might have even been better than they thought last year, but there was a lot of stuff that kind of bottomed out pretty bad. They were horrible on offense. You could just say, all right, on to the next one. We'll see what happens. The expectation now has grown this summer, and I guess since last season ended. It's grown, and they're expected to take a big jump now. So you have to you kind of wear that all season long, and it's no longer just a success, I don't think, to get to a bowl game. So there's that piece of it that goes into it as well. Like you have to combine that with the expectations.
I saw a piece of video floating around social media this weekend from Will Compton, who has become like celebrity spokesperson for Nebraska football. And he was responding to Paul Feinbaum, which, by the way, I thought was great. I thought it was great on Friday. This happened, I believe, while we were recording our last episode. I thought it was fantastic that Paul Feinbaum went after Matt Rhule. I don't even care what he said. I just think it's great for us. It's great for people in Nebraska that he's taught that a talking head at ESPN is even mentioning the name Nebraska when it's had 7 consecutive losing seasons. So that's my like non-controversial take about
Nice.
the Feinbaum moment that happened late last week. But Will Compton was responding to it, and it's like it's hard to tell if he's joking or if he's like half joking or exactly what's going on in his mind. But he said, quote, "We were 4 plays away from being 9-3 last year." Like that's a good thing. And in the reality, that's accurate. But it's also kind of depressing. Like four
Yeah.
plays. 4 plays is a lot. 4 games. We were 4 losses away from being 9-3 last year, and each one of those losses was defined or determined by one play that just like went completely sideways. And you can go back and look at the games. We're not going to do that because it's almost August, and pinpoint those plays, whether they were in September or August in the case of the Minnesota game, or most of them were packed into the month of November. So remember that. Only got 4 plays to fix, but that's not an easy thing to do. And for me, that I'm gonna try to like bring myself back to center at times this August when we get deep in the weeds about analyzing whatever it is that's the flavor of the day. And just remember, we need to determine whether this team has turned the program, or I'm sorry, whether this program has turned a corner. And we're not going to know. Players will offer their answers. We're not going to know probably until around September 7th.
Yep. Can't wait to find out though. So we'll have the next month to discuss all the ways that they are attempting to turn the corner as a program. But like we said, still not finding out the answer for another few weeks here. When we return, we will get into a big recruiting weekend for Nebraska football that might I say a trend-setting recruiting weekend. We can talk about that piece of it as well. But please subscribe and follow us on Twitter at LockedOnNEB. We tweet out all the episodes, both video and audio, whenever we do them, which is now 5 days a week. You can also email us. Send us an email, lockedonneb@gmail.com. We can get to your thoughts, concerns, and comments as well. We'll be back after this.
All right, Mitch Sherman here for a new sponsor to our show. Excited to tell all of you listeners and viewers about Ibotta. That's IBOTTA. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, which I know we need, and toys. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. So while other apps give you points that don't amount to much, Ibotta provides cash back that you can move into your bank or PayPal account or take as gift cards. You just simply add the offers in the app, upload the receipt, and voila, the money is yours. Save on over 2,400 brands, shop at more than 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just to try it out. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. So go to the App Store or Google Play, download the free Ibotta app, and start earning cash back now. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege.
All right, we're back. And first of all, Mitch, what did you do this weekend? I played 36 holes of golf with my friends from high school, which is something that we do every year. That was the 14th consecutive year that we have this tournament. So I did not win, but I did compete in golf this weekend.
Well, that's good. That's good. At least you avoided like the 100-degree or 95-degree heat that's coming right as preseason camp opens. This is not the first time this has happened where it's been somewhat manageable with the weather in late July, and then camp opens and it's 100 degrees. So Matt Rhule is not going to go inside in the shade, or maybe they can pump some air. They can make it 75 degrees if they want inside the Hawks Championship Center. No, they're not going to be in there. They'll be doing some work in there. They may have some linemen in there or whatever, but they're going to be out on the grass because that's what he wants. He wants this team to practice on the grass. They went all spring practicing on the grass. Then they went into the stadium in the spring game and had 2 knee injuries in the first half. So that's why we've had the discussion about why Memorial Stadium is going to go to grass permanently in a couple of years. But they're going to be out there in the heat, getting acclimated. Fortunately, won't be in pads for the first couple of days. Saturday, you'll have an opportunity to go to a practice and watch an entire practice if you want to pay $25 to support the 1890 initiative, Nebraska's collective. I will hopefully find a way to get into that event and be able to see practice, and we'll talk about that next week. But no, for me this weekend, it was kind of quiet. The baseball coaching stuff for the summer is over. We've been on vacation. We had Big Ten media days, just kind of hanging around the house and like enjoying the relative peace while it still exists before the craziness of going back to school gets going. So my son is gone at a camp in Iowa. So really kind of quiet and strange around the house with just one kid hanging out. But as we talked about in the first segment, are going to be welcomed to the craziness of parenting very soon. And I look forward to hearing about how your weekends change. You won't be playing 36 holes of golf. I hope you savored it while you were out there, and knowing that it may be a while before you get to do that on a weekend.
Yeah, that was kind of the last hurrah. So relative peace, that might be a term that gets thrown around on this podcast a couple of times. So let's talk about it in terms of Nebraska football. One thing that does not cause relative peace, when the top offensive line recruit in the country shows up to campus, it causes I don't know about mass chaos, but there was quite the stir on Friday when David Sanders arrived in a gigantic van with Dylan Raiola, and seemed like half of Nebraska's recruiting staff and members of his family, and he popped out, and there waiting for him in front of the Osborne Athletic Complex was a few Husker fans, a few
200 to 250 is the number, the estimate that I heard. I had a plant in the crowd. I did not go. I'm not talking about any media here, but I did have a source in the crowd.
Nice.
Use that word loosely, but he told me that yes, about 200 to 250 people. And Sanders got out of the vehicle with Raiola, and David's family was in there. And there was some impromptu, just kind of like not planned by Nebraska, some music that played. They played the fight song. And it was a nice little moment. And Tennessee took note of that. And they painted the big rock that the Vol fans paint whenever something big is going on campus. They painted it for David Sanders. And then on Saturday, the Vol fans wanted to outdo Nebraska with their showing. I think what we've come to learn here is that on a Friday or Saturday night, probably a Tuesday night also, if you advertise that you have a big time recruit coming onto campus and he's going to get out of a car and walk into a building, but there's no game, there's no basketball game, there's no baseball game, there's no football practice, that's going to cut into your numbers. You probably should not expect thousands to turn out for that kind of a door opening ceremony. I don't think this is going to become necessarily a big trend in college football, because Tennessee had like 58 people who showed up to see David Sanders, and I imagine it was somewhat underwhelming. So
it had to have been less. It looked like less for Tennessee, which you would think. So if the roles were reversed, not to spend too much time on this, if Tennessee goes first and Nebraska goes second, and they show that Tennessee tried to do this and they got 8 people to go, I bet Nebraska would have had more if they would have been the response. They love response. Nebraska fans love a challenge. They love to be challenged, and so they were thrown on their fanhood, right? And so they were kind of thrown into this, and nobody knows what it is. But if they had to respond to something Tennessee did, I bet there would have been like double that on Friday.
Not to sound too harsh, but they just love to win at things when their football team has not done that much in recent years.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. Also on Friday, the settlement in the NCAA antitrust case, we got some pretty hard roster numbers. at this point for all, of college athletics. Obviously we're talking about the football part of it here. 105 is the number. And so Nebraska had, is about 150 in terms of their roster at the moment. And so they do, they'll have to kind of work on cutting that down. And we'll hear from, Troy Dan and Matt Rhule and beyond on this in the coming year or so before it's implemented. But, Nebraska is a place that is going to have to kind of cut down a little bit. And I can't imagine they'd be expected to hard cut down right away, be kind of grandfathered into this process. But it is definitely a significant change for Nebraska in the sport.
That we definitely don't know. We don't know if there's going to be a sliding adjustment into this, or if Nebraska, like every other school, will have to be at 105 a year. Some schools will get to 105 next year because they're not much over that right now, or they're not over that at all. There are some rosters around even the Big Ten that are right down around that number. And there are schools that are looking at this solely as, wow, we just got 20 scholarships added to the allotment. And then there are others like Nebraska that are saying, oh my goodness, we've got to find a way to cut 40 players from our roster. Very different conversations. Nebraska's roster will be at 120 this week. The preseason camp roster is 120. You have to figure that if you're a player who's not on the 120 and you're not a true freshman walk-on who still has an opportunity ahead of you to work your way onto that 120, they've not received any opportunity to this point. But if you're if you're a sophomore, redshirt freshman, whatever, you're not on that 120, you have some serious work to do about being a member of this team beyond 2024. And that's all dependent, of course, on how the NCAA allows schools to kind of ease into that 105. I don't think it's going to be like a 5-year process. Like you can go down to 130 and 25, 120 and 26. No, it's going to be fairly fast.
Yep.
You might not have to get all the way to 105 the first year. You might be able to have injured reserve. You might be able to have a taxi squad. As we've talked about before, the devil is kind of in the details with this stuff. So how does that all look? We'll find out in the months ahead. One other thing before we go to the break and get to the number 2 player on our countdown is something else that came out in the settlement, the terms that were laid out Friday, and they've still got to be approved by the judge in this case. And this one may not be. This was kind of a shocker to me. So you're going to have revenue sharing. We know that. And if you're a Power 4 school that can afford to pay the full 20 to 22 million that's going to be allowed for the big pool of revenue sharing, estimates are right now that about 140,000 per football player will be the salary, like the base level pay. That, of course, does not include NIL. There are a lot of players who are at these big programs now who are making 140,000 already, and in some cases much more than that. David Sanders has an opportunity to go and make a lot more than that, like 10 times more than that, or in excess of even that per year at the school that he signs with. But the settlement terms say that if you have an NIL deal in excess of $600, it must go through a clearinghouse that's set up by the NCAA to meet, or the whatever the governing body for revenue share is, NIL. In excess of $600, it must go through this clearinghouse to meet approval to determine basically if it's a legitimate deal. That's new, and that is going to turn some heads, and that's probably going to go to court. So we'll see if they can hold up on that one. My guess is no.
One thing I've always learned, Mitch, and we should definitely have learned over the last, I guess, half a decade in college football and college athletics, there's always a workaround. There's always something that could go in there. So we'll see how that all looks when it comes out. But certainly, good details, good information coming out from that we'll learn more about over the coming year. We'll come back and get to number 2 on our camp countdown when we return. All right, it's Happer here. Let's talk about Factor. Warm, sunny days are calling fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. You can meet your wellness goals with a menu of chef-crafted meals that include options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious and great tasting meals. So what are you waiting for? Do it today. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll find new flavors to explore. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use that code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That is lockedoncollege50, code lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50. And it's Apper here to tell you about the FanDuel Sportsbook as we wind down for the summer and then ramp back up to college football and the NFL. FanDuel has got you covered. But in the period of time right now where we're just waiting, they're not quite sportsing as much as we want them to. FanDuel has got you covered, though. All you have to do is open the app and dream up any bets anytime you're in the mood. So right now, new customers on the FanDuel Sportsbook get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 that you can spend on spreads and money lines and player props and more. The Olympics are going on right now as well. You could check that out. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff or Olympic shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Okay, back for just a couple of minutes to close out our Monday show. We are going to look at the next player on our list of important Huskers. I'm not going to read through everybody who we've listed so far. If you've heard the shows, you know who we talked about. Number 3 was Tommy Hill. That was the last player that we discussed on Friday. Number 2, we're staying on the defensive side. Connor, it is...
We're going to go with Nash Hutmaker, who's right in the middle of this defense. We always talk about Nash and Ty as if they're one person. I think, and Jabari Butler, you threw that's a gigantic person. Yes. But maybe it's a smaller person than it would have been. He'll be a little lighter at his playing weight this year. Remember, he wrestled in the offseason. He ended up being pretty good at it. And so Nash gets the nod here at number 2. And you guys might be able to figure out who number 1 is now, but it's just, he's the nose tackle, right? He's the guy who is probably the catalyst for all of the stuff that happens around him in the defense. Yeah. It's such a key for this 3-3-5 where you have this kind of, it's not just, I don't want to take credit away from Nash. Obviously the first thing that you have to do is kind of eat space and take on blockers. But I think they're maybe expecting a little bit more from Nash this year. He was great at that last year. Such an important piece of this defense. He's the anchor of the defense for Nebraska, which we all expect to be a really, really good one. So I think he is as important as anybody to Nebraska's success this year, and that's what makes him number 2.
We've talked throughout this countdown about one of the factors that leads us to put a player in the place where we've put him, and it's if he went away, in what kind of a position would Nebraska be? And I think if you take Nash Hutmaker off this defense, it's a different group.
You might have to just change the defense entirely.
Right.
You're gonna have to change it around.
Not as dramatic as like removing the quarterback from the offense, which happened in Nebraska last year early in the season. Sure, I think Ty Robinson could play that spot in the middle, but Nash's body type and just the way that he moves and the way that he creates leverage, he's so good at that now. I think wrestling has helped him in that area. Those were things that he struggled with early in his career. I mean, he's always been a big, strong guy. He came into Nebraska as this kind of schoolboy legend out of South Dakota, and you knew he could lift a ton of weight. But it was getting himself in position to be able to go against these experienced college offensive linemen, these Big Ten offensive linemen. And he's often going to face a double team when you play that position just because of the way that your alignment is structured. There's 5 offensive linemen. Nebraska's got 3 guys with their hands in the ground in the front when it's in base defense. to be real, it's a lot of times it's 4 because they'll bring the jack linebacker up to the line of scrimmage. But Nash is the one, as you said, who anchors that whole thing. And now, as a fifth-year senior, he understands what he has to do to get an advantage in a way that I think others who play on this defense do not. And Ty Robinson is not as good if you take him out of the defensive end spot, the big defensive end spot, and you put him in the middle. Riley Van Poppel, I think, is somebody that Nebraska is going to be able to use in this position. He's a sophomore, a second-year player. He'll get reps. Nash is not going to play 70 reps on defense a game, but he's the one they're going to rely on. I'll finish it with this. When Nebraska's had a nose tackle, regardless of the scheme that it's been in, when Nebraska's had a nose tackle that it could throw out there and say, you do your thing and we will play off you, we will work around you, that's when the defense gets really scary. And the last time that Nebraska had somebody who I would say who was better or better than what Nash has the potential to be this year, it was 15 years ago, and it was Ndamukong Suh.
Absolutely.
And he was the most dominant player in college football, and Nebraska had arguably the best defense in the country. So,
yeah.
I mean, we're not going down that road with Nash or this defense, but that's the ceiling that you can get when you have a great nose tackle.
It's an important point to make. Nobody's comparing him to Suh, but it's an important point to make that he is sort of taking on that same role in this defense. So the way I always talk about it on defense is like the more that you get from your better players, the easier it's going to make it on your less good players. And so Nash is absolutely one of those guys right at the top. Mitch, before we get out here, I didn't get a chance to read the story, but it's on my to-do list today, like in the next hour.
You may want to block out about an hour.
The story on ESPN about Jordan Larson and her journey over the last several years here, who is, I mean, Jordan's obviously a beloved Husker and a great Olympian. I mean, all these things. She's checked so many boxes. Just give us a little tease on this story if you haven't read it yet.
Yeah, so I read it on Sunday. It takes it's 8,000 words. The reporter Aishwarya Kumar from ESPN.com, she tweeted that she spent 5 months on this article, which is a great luxury to have as a person who's a feature writer for ESPN.com, which has employed me or The Athletic or wherever you're at. But I love that she did it. And I love that ESPN gave her the freedom to be able to invest in this kind of a story, invest her time. I didn't want it to end as I read it. I'm like, there's got to be some more. I was like savoring the last few words. The ending of it is fantastic. And there's things in there that will really, I think, catch the interest of Nebraska fans, Nebraska sports fans, just fans of like sports in the state, even if you're not a Husker fan, volleyball fans, Team USA. This is her 4th time on Team USA. The American women play on Monday at 11 a.m. Central in Paris against China in their opening match of these Olympic Games. Jordan's on there along with ex-Huskers Justine Wong-Aranches and Kelsey Robinson-Cook. So you want to know, there was so much in this article that I did not know about Jordan, and I have followed her career for about 20 plus years. You know, she came to Nebraska and was a great high school player before her time at Nebraska. She was a freshman in 2005, and then Nebraska won a national championship in 2006, and it goes through that time so deep into the personal part of her life, which when athletes allow that to that kind of light to be shed, it's really cool to see. So highly recommend the story on ESPN.com by Aishwarya Kumar that published Sunday about Nebraska legend Jordan Larson.
All right, one day closer to camp, we get to number 1 on our countdown, and a couple more storylines tomorrow on the show. We'll let you go today, but first, the Locked On Podcast Network has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts at Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app.